Hey, good evening, everybody. Good evening. We're back again. This is episode 40, 40, episode 40. So I'm glad to be back in the building, glad to be back in the house. I'm just excited as well um, for, for all that we've been able to do and accomplish. And I'm just looking forward to all the other things that we're going to able to continue to do with the show. Um, But again, just glad this episode 40. Going to continue this conversation going on. Got some good traffic. My roommates and stuff coming through the house. But hey, we're going to keep this thing going. Make sure you jump on. Um, Let me know, comment, let me know where you're tuning in from. Feel free to share this because tonight's conversation is going to be a very profound conversation that I know is going to be relevant to a lot of people and probably touch on a lot of a lot of things that people probably been thinking about and want to address. So that's what I want to do. I'm going to share this a little bit with a few people on a few of the pages. So as I do that, again, just jump in. Let me know where you're tuning in from. I appreciate the continued support. Uh, it is greatly appreciated. Greatly appreciated. So tonight show is going to be one that I really feel like it's going to be. Tonight's show is one that's going to be off the chain, and I'm saying that because I know for a fact that it's going to be a blessing to a lot of people. All right, so as I share this, we're just going to continue on with the conversation. So, hope you guys can hear me. Let me know if you can hear me. Um, and as I send this out, make sure you share this with some people and let them know that you're tuning in. So, tonight, we're just going to get right into it. So, tonight's show is a great show because the topic tonight is one that I feel that it is profound, not only profound, but something that I think that we all can relate to, and not only relate to, but yeah, I got it. We can not only relate to, but it is um, something that I feel that a lot of us, it has impacted us a lot. I really feel like it has impacted us a lot on what we deal with and impact our way of life, our quality of life. And I just want to just take the time to share this thing. I'm trying to get it to where people can comment on it. I don't know what's going on, but we're going to continue on. Um, yeah, but it is what it is. But thank you guys for tuning in. There we go. Now I got everything set. So just wanted to invite you all into this conversation tonight. Again, I'm grateful. This episode 40, and we're just gonna get right into it, right into this conversation, right into the topic, because I think this topic is one, and I've been on a dealing with healing, processing things, and overcoming some stuff over the last few weeks. And that's something that I want to continue to be on, well, last few months, to be honest. But that's something that I want to continue to go on because I feel like it's so relevant, especially in today's time, because it's so much that's going on. It's so much that we are not a people. A lot of people don't have a medium out there to really address without feeling like they're going to be judged, cast out, uh, um, and frowned upon for having conversations about things that impact the majority of people. And that's one of the things, one of the motivating factors behind starting this platform is to provide a platform that can talk about those things. All right, but before we do that, there's a few people I want to give a shout out to. And I usually do a shout out about some small business owners or entrepreneurs, not even small but large, people that I personally know. But I wanted to do a little something different tonight. I want to give a shout out to a few individuals as well as a group. The Men of Valor out of a group out of Greensboro, Alabama, my home stomping grounds, place where that's very near and dear to my heart. I want to give a shout out to them for the work that they have been doing in the community. These are just men that I think they really, if I'm not mistaken, please correct me if I'm wrong. This all started with barbershop talk, where guys was in the barbershop talking about things they can do to better the community. They came together and they putting ideas together, and they're reaching out in the community and having a positive impact for the community and community of Greensboro. So I just wanted to say I acknowledge and salute you. You all individuals, all you men out there coming together, because that's what community is about. It's about you, we all coming together, we pooling our resources, and we're about reaching the people. And I mean reaching the people is meeting them where they at, having great conversations, and meeting their needs. All right, there's two other individuals I want to give a shout out to. Other individual I want to give a shout out to is Mr. Kendrick Page. Kendrick Page from back in Greensboro. I want to publicly acknowledge him for all of the volunteer work that he's been doing, especially last year. I found out on my sister's show, the Black Bet Experience, they had Coach King, who's the head football coach in Greensboro. He had mentioned about the volunteer work that Kendrick Page do in the community and for the team. And I wanted to give him a shout out, and you know, I sent him a note to express, you know what I'm saying, you know, that I'm very impressed by what he do. I'm proud of what he do, and I wanted to commend him for his efforts. So I wanted to publicly give Kendrick Page a shout out. So shout out to you, Kendrick. Much respect. And the last person I want to give a shout out, and I'm centered around my hometown, Greensboro, Daryl Evans. Daryl Evans. So Daryl does a lot of stuff behind the scenes. You don't see him trying to do a lot of things as far as get credit, but I know Daryl do a lot of things. His hands in a lot of stuff. He volunteer and help out a lot of different things. And this is just for me observing from where I'm from. So I just want to say I salute you, both of those individuals. We all went to school together. We all matriculated at the halls, the great and historical halls of Greensboro East High School. And I just wanted to just give them a shout out, the Men of Valor as well, and just let them know that, you know, I appreciate what they do. I appreciate what they do. Again, before we get started, jump in the comments. Let me know where you're tuning in from. I'm just trying to make sure that we can get this thing going. As you guys know, I'm still in Kansas, so I'll be in Kansas for a little bit longer, but we'll get started with that. Soon to be leaving the Midwest. Kind of excited about that and finishing up school here. But with all that said and done, all right, feel free to comment at any time, but I want to get right into this thing here because I feel that this is something that is so necessary to talk about, and that is identifying and addressing the hidden impacts of being neglected. I said it again, that's identifying and addressing the hidden impacts of being neglected. Now, there's a lot of things that go on. We talk about neglect, right? Because a lot of people, when we start talking about neglect is something that that we all have to deal with, that we all have dealt with in some way, form, or fashion in our lives. In any type of interaction, even personally, we can neglect and we can do things. And I'm gonna pull up just the definition of neglect, just so we can have a conversation about it, because I feel like it's good to have a starting point where we can have an understanding. So when I look up the word neglect, right? Neglect is the definition of the word neglect as a verb is fail to care for properly. Simple, fail to care for properly. And as a noun, neglect is the state or fact of being uncared for. The state or fact of being uncared for. Now, why I wanted to start off with that, because I feel so much and so strongly about this, because guess what? I can speak from personal experience on this. And this is why I'm very passionate about talking about these things, because I can remember as a 21-year-old, 20 years ago, I was in Killeen, Texas, had just moved into an apartment, and I had a conversation, and I asked God, I was like, God, why am I the way that I am? And when I asked God that question, the response was, I'm that way because I have an issue with my dad. And I went and I went to say, hey, Mom, my mom, always there. Thank you for your continued support. She jumped on. But I went after that and I fought that in my head because I was like, no, I mean, I ain't got no issue with my dad. I just try to chalk it up more so of typical father-son relationship. Teenagers, you think you know everything, and then you always want to just push against and kind of be rebellious against your parents. But the Holy Spirit kept revealing to me that I had an issue with my dad. And what it ended up showing me was my why, the why behind who I was at that point in my life was a result of me compensating for me feeling neglected by my father. Even though my dad was there, even though my dad was, I grew up in a two-parent home, even though I grew up in a loving environment, a supportive environment, I still had to deal with the impact of being neglected. And my neglect came from my neglect came from a place of unmet expectations, unmet expectations. And I would tell you, and I had the right to expect them. What I mean by that is my neglect came from a place where I expected my dad to do certain things that he did not do. Even though I got it from other places, I didn't get it from him and I expected it from him. So because of that expectation, I felt uncared for, which left a void on the inside, which in turn impacted my life years later without me even recognizing and knowing it. And that's why I wanted to talk about that. That's why I wanted to bring this up, because I really feel, I know for a fact, there's a lot of us out there, there's somebody that's listening to this right now, and you're trying to figure out what's going on. And like I said, in my neglect wasn't one of a very extreme case. And I know some people have dealt with so much other stuff. And you can be like, oh man, that you still had your dad in your house. You had two parents. You know what I'm saying? You ain't never had to worry about your lights being cut off. Like, we weren't rich, but I ain't had to worry about a lot of stuff that I know other people had to worry about. Other people had to go through. I did not have to deal with it. But that neglect still impacted me in the same capacity. And that's why I wanted to address neglect and how to identify and address it. Dara, hey, what's going on, my brother? Hey, we on the home stretch. So he said that's very good. And then this is why, because hey, Miss Paige Banks, how you doing? Thank you again. I gave your son a shout out earlier because he's been doing great things. And I told him, I reached out to him, and I said, I appreciate all of the volunteer work and the things that he's doing for the community. And he's representing his family well. And I have a lot of respect for him as a man and the things that he's doing. And just good afternoon for my mom, she said, from the family. So thank you, guys. So I want to jump right on to what I was talking about, because this thing's about to get real good. We're about to cook on this thing, all right? When we start talking about neglect, a lot of times I think we sensationalize neglect. And we don't realize, like, we just be like, well, I made it through. So because I made it through it, then I'm good. No, because the hidden impacts of it is it can affect you so much that you would in turn waste a lot of time and energy and effort in your future because of the neglect, because you haven't identified it, or you haven't addressed it. You have not identified or addressed it. I want to read something from one of my former coworkers, LaShonda Footman. She's been doing, and it's been a beautiful thing. It's been great to see what she's been doing on social media. But over the last 12 days, she's just been posting like 10 random thoughts. And one of her thoughts, that she posted today, it was right up the alley. And I'm going to read this. And this was number 9 on her thoughts. She said, because of past trauma, I used to think I didn't need anyone, but that was a lie. And a protective measure I put in place for myself to avoid disappointment. She said, I need my village, whether for child support, work support, marital support, life support, turn up support, spiritual support, and etc. And that's what I wanted to address it, because I reached out and I said, hey, I'm dealing with this. I'm talking about this basically today in the same thing, because think about it. A lot of us have dealt with stuff that we subconsciously put control or protective mechanism in our mind and in our lifestyle to try to protect ourselves. And what we end up doing is we end up wearing ourselves out. We be overwhelmed with anxiety. We become overthinkers. We end up pushing people away that God has put there to be in our lives because we have this unaddressed issues, and we push and we do it in a sense to feeling like we're protecting ourselves, but what we're really doing is hurting ourselves. And one of the scariest things about neglect is whatever that trauma may have been, and I'm going to use mine because I can only speak for mine. With me and my dad, it wasn't an issue as if I didn't know that my daddy loved me. It was an issue of what he prioritized at the time. And I want to break this thing down because there's so many different layers with it. So at the time, and I'm speaking, these are the things that I'm speaking about. And a lot of people can be like, oh, well, that just may have been, this, that, and the third. And I'm not comparing, but I'm just speaking facts about my reality. So I was the kid that I wanted my dad to be like at my games and stuff. And I can remember being in Little League, playing in Little League baseball games. And my dad would come to, very rarely would come, but my mom was always there. My granddaddy, I can remember my brother, my uncle, they would drive from Demopolis 20, 25 miles and come to some of the games. But my dad he would be there, but then my dad was a pastor in 2 churches, helping a lot of people out, advocating in the community and doing all these other things. And I used to always want him to be there, but he wouldn't be there at certain games. Yes, he was doing quote unquote God's work. Yes, he was helping the community. Yes, he was helping other people who needed the help. That doesn't mean that I didn't desire him to be there, but as a child, that's what I desired. So guess what happened to Robert? That caused a void in Robert that Robert began to fill with through sexual promiscuity, trying to get that validation from somebody else through sex. And also what it ended up also doing was it impacted me in relationships because I am very uber sensitive to somebody that I'm in a relationship with who in a position of a relationships where it's supposed to be intimate or the expectation for us to be close, or you prioritizing something else over me, because that triggers that neglect that I had as a child. And that's what I want to talk about, how it is so important to identify those things so that you can connect the dots so it can help you manage it as you get older. Because the problem is we go with these things and these issues and they go unmanaged, and we have chaos in our lives, and we lose relationships, we lose life experience, we lose so much, we waste so much time and energy on these things because they go unaddressed, and we don't want to identify. Not only that, we don't want to identify. What we end up doing is we end up wasting so much time and effort. Ms. Paige Banks, she said, when the protector has hurt you or allowed you to be hurt, it's hard to turn it down for help. Who do I run to? It's scary mentioning their names to others in fear of what might happen later. That is so true. That is so true. And that's why I say, I personally know some people who have been through some trauma, some traumatic things that I couldn't even imagine. I couldn't even imagine happening to me. And I've had some people on this show share some things, and I just want to talk about sexual trauma, where some people have been raped repeatedly by like their stepfather or a family member or somebody, and they had to deal with those things, and those things cause a lot of issues. Yes, and that's why when we have to be able to identify the impacts of it, because first of all, that's where we're talking about forgiveness and healing. Now, when we talk about forgiveness, and I'm not talking about because I made a post the other day, and I want people to realize this, and I want to say this: reconciliation does not mean reconnection. Healing, forgiveness is not about the other person. Forgiveness is about you. That is you foregoing so that you can release yourself from carrying all of that stuff, so that you can begin the journey to the process of healing, so that that is not a noose or a weight on your shoulder that you have to carry with you for the rest of your life that impacts the other things that you can do, or the other relationships that you have in your life. And that's what I wanted to talk about. But Ms. Geraldine Pastor said, she said, I agree with you in regard to dad until I realized his role. However, it seems like a man, things becomes my son's experience the same with his dad. How do we break this? So I would tell you this, right? All right. So, and speaking back to my father, and I'm gonna tell you, this is what I love about God. God is the God of a second chance. God is a God that, first of all, nobody is perfect, man. We all are trying to find our way. We're all trying to do the best we know how. And the great thing about life is living and learning and adjusting and doing better. So in the case between me and my father, my dad wholeheartedly in his heart felt that he was doing the right thing. The problem that he had was he had an imbalance. And what I mean by imbalance is, and I'm not talking about equality, because I think when we start talking about, we talk about the military all the time, work-life balance, right? A lot of times people feel like everything has to be the same level to be equal, and it doesn't. For example, if I give you a dime is very small. But for me to equal the same thing, the same value of that dime, I have to give you 10 pennies. 10 pennies seems like it's a whole lot more than the dime, but they're still equal in the value. So what am I talking about? When we start talking about balance in our lives, it's all about the value instead of the quantity. And I want us to really kind of get into our head. And in the case of my dad, he had an imbalance with what he prioritized or valued, because he felt that he was doing God's work. And I'm going to share with you guys something that was so profound that I didn't really realize myself until later. I remember I was 18 years old. It was May 1998. Hey, 23 years ago. Time don't slow down for nobody. But it was May 1998, beginning of May. And I can remember I came in the house like I usually do, went back in the back, and I told my mom, Dad's like, hey, hey, Mom, Dad, just let y'all know I'm here, whatever. And I went back upstairs. The next day, my mom had a conversation with me, and she said, Robert, your daddy started crying. Now, my dad, I only know my daddy to cry, let me see, twice. That's why I've physically seen my daddy shed tears. But my mom told me that. And I was like, dang, I'm like, what are you crying for? And he was like, my son is gone. Now, and I saw a difference though. My senior year, towards the end of my junior year and my senior year, I started to see him prioritize differently. I started to see him grow. He would come to more games. He would be more supportive and be there more. But I think he realized that he didn't maximize his time that he had with me being in the house. Because 18, I was getting ready to leave the house. Fast forward that, I've seen us fast forward that with him, with the grandkids, and how he was with his grandkids. When I tell you, I can remember in 2003, 2004. It was 2004. I was deployed to Iraq. And I remember Robert was with my parents at the time. And I called home and I was like, hey, Mom, hey, where Robert at? I want to talk to Robert. And she was like, Robert going with your dad. What you mean? And he took a baby bed. My dad would have my son with him all day. When I was younger, my dad would have us, he'll take us up to my grandma's house. And I saw a difference with him maximizing the second time that he had, the second chance that he had with being there. And I was so grateful to see that. And even in that, our relationship blossomed so much more because I was able to see the change in his action. Even though I had to deal with the neglect, God healed me from that by helping me identify, and he allowed me, he blessed me enough so that I could see the change in my dad and his behavior. So it's not like, oh, I'm mad or anything. And I think a lot of times a lot of people we carry so much undealt with neglect and undealt with issues because we feel if I, if I, if I go, if I address the source of my neglect, I'm tarnishing or I'm tarnishing the legacy of the person. Uh, uh, I'm tarnishing the legacy of the person, and you're not. You're addressing what is impacting you. See, as a parent, as someone who's a parent of grown kids, and all the way down to a 9-year-old, a 23, all the way down to a 9-year-old, I can tell you that I've learned some lessons. I've grown in some areas. I'm able to do things a little bit different from lessons learned, from being able to have a different perspective. And because of that, my interactions with the younger kids is different because of the lessons learned with the older kids. That doesn't mean that I didn't love the older kids any less. It's just I learned from and I was able to address. Uh, Miss Geraldine, she said, what they gave is not what we wanted, yet it was equal. Communications, talking to one another, sharing views and ideas, etc. Yes, I see the second chance with Hubby and Grants. Yes. So when we start talking about that communication, and this is why I wanted to this is why I wanted to talk about this, because a lot of the source of our own neglect come from the people okay, a lot of the source of our own neglect come from people who have not dealt with or have unaddressed issues with being neglected themselves. And it's almost like a generational curse that's passed down. You know, a friend of mine was talking to me about she got a coworker that like is like not affectionate at all to her kids. And I said the first thing that popped to my mind was she grew up in an environment where people didn't show affection. And this is the thing about it. And this is why I wanted to talk about this and address this, because this how this thing can play itself out and really have a impact. So you grow up in an environment where it wasn't any people wasn't affectionate. They wasn't affectionate. They wasn't verbal. They didn't express how they felt. But you still desired it, because guess what? I don't care who you are. You can harden yourself up as much as you want to. It makes you feel good for somebody to express how they feel about you. It does something to you for somebody to tell you, hey, I appreciate you. It does something to you for somebody to genuinely express to you, I thank you. I appreciate what you do for me. Hey, I love you. I am proud of you. Hey, I believe in you. I know you can do it. It does something to you. Now, just because you grew up in an environment where you didn't get that, that didn't mean that you didn't desire it or need it. But what happens is you have people who grow up in that environment. So when they have kids, they be like, well, I ain't get it, so they don't need it. And then their kid needs it. And then they sit there and be like, well, you know, y'all just need to get over it. Y'all soft. No, you need to address your issue. You need to address that, because you are willfully neglecting your kids because you can't identify what your child needs because you're basing it on what you didn't get. Ms. Paige Banks, she said, my dad was the same. I felt as he didn't spend enough time with me. However, my children and grands got all the attention. He would be there at their games before me. You are right, Ms. Paige. I remember seeing him at as many games as I can think of. But that's because, you know, we get a chance to live and learn. But this is the thing I want to address. My issue was because I was neglected, my coping mechanism became being promiscuous. That was my coping mechanism. Now, that can lead to a lot of different things. And this is why I wanted to say that, because, that can lead to a lot of different things. And a lot of other people, it's different things. Some people, it may have been drugs. Some people, it may be alcohol. Some people, it may be, whatever it is that you try to use to fill that void. And it's a void. That's why it's so important to identify, because neglect is something that, I'm telling you, neglect is something that will wound you at the core of your soul. It will wound you at the core of your soul, especially when it goes unaddressed. Because guess what? We try to convince ourselves that, hey, I'm good. I want to talk about it. So what are some of the areas that people feel neglected in? Emotional support, financial support, just being present. I was speaking to a first lady yesterday, First Lady Ocean, Vanilla Ocean. I was speaking to her, and I thanked her because she was there for me in a time, a very low place in my life. She was there for me, but we never even talked about it. And I thanked her for being there, even in her silence. And what she said to me is, and it's something that's very powerful. She said that sometimes we don't have to say nothing. We just got to be there and let people know I'm here. And that type of support was very necessary. It was very necessary for me, just to know you have that support system. Listen, and I'm talking about, it's some people that I know that, and I want to talk about this thing of how it impacts relationships. I'm talking about relationships, not just you married or a boyfriend and girl. I'm talking about your relationship with your kids, your relationship on your job, everything. Some people, because of neglect in their past, they feel like they got to control everything. They just got to be in control. And now you wonder why you can't have no relationship. You wonder why your kids don't want to talk to you. You wonder why your kids that grew up and they don't want to come home. And in your mind, well, you just had to control stuff because you had unaddressed issues from neglect. But you controlling everything wasn't a coping mechanism to make you feel at peace, as if you could control everything. And how many relationships destroyed because of it? How many? How many? There are some people that get into relationships and they don't trust nobody to do something for them, and they have these unrealistic expectations that diminish relationships, all because that you have issues with neglect and you haven't dealt with it. Addressing a source of neglect does not tarnish who that person is, because a lot of times, a lot of people don't even know that they neglected you. Some do, some don't care. There's a difference between willful neglect and being neglected. In my case, mine wasn't a case of willful neglect. Mine was a case of lacking understanding and really gaining an understanding of being what someone's needs. So, and I want to address that, and I shared it before. I want to share it here. My youngest son, Robert, I can remember me having to adjust my parenting style to meet his need. And I say that because a great teacher and a great parent, listen, as a parent, as a teacher, anything in that capacity, we can become so rigid that we forget that we forget that the people are the human aspect of something. And because of us being so rigid, what that does is that creates an environment where we begin to do more damage than good. So being in the military, being in positions of authority, there are standards, there are things that we have to operate by. There are standards and things that we have to operate by. There are rules, there are regulations that say, hey, we have to do this, this, and this. These are the standards. Bam. And you can just be like, bam, 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 bam. But guess what? When you're dealing with people, you have so many different variables that you have to consider. You have to consider people with their life, lifestyle, what's going on, home life, work life, so many different people, so many different variables that we have to consider, to where we have to be able to adjust certain rules, not change the standard, but adjust certain rules to fit the need of the individual at the time. Because if I did everything the same way, it's not going to work. It's going to create more chaos. Miss Page said, she said, I felt that having my children, people made me feel not wanted sometimes. She said, there were times the pain was so real. This made me teach love in my home, regardless of what a person was going through. They did listen. They are some loving and caring young people. But I felt like an outcast. I never allowed them to know what I was going through. I found love in a loving church. Ms. Paige Banks, thank you so much for your transparency and sharing it. I can completely relate to how you feel. And what I wanted to do right now is really commend you, because what you did was you identified it. And your way of addressing it was you didn't allow that hurt and that pain to allow you to become bitter and pour that into your kids. You had the courage, even though it hurt, even though I know there was nights where you cried, even though it feels the shame that you may have felt with walking around in a small town and feeling that way. I commend you for instilling that into your kids. And that is so powerful. And I want to thank you for your transparency. I want to thank you for your commitment to your family. And I want to thank you for sharing that, because guess what? Not only that blessed me, but I know that's a blessing to others. Because you know what, Miss Paige Banks, there's a lot of people that feel exactly how you feel. And they don't feel like they have a way out. They don't feel like nobody really understands them, because guess what? I can guarantee you it felt that way. You felt isolated. And I know what it feels like to feel isolated. And I tell you, the reason why I want to get into that, the reason why I'm talking about neglect and addressing it and understanding the hidden impacts of being neglected is because the number one goal of the enemy is to make you feel isolated, so that he can isolate you and make you feel like you're on your own, make you feel like nobody understands you. And then by you feeling that way, what he in turns do is try to get you to a place where you're depressed, where you're overwhelmed, where you're dealing with anxiety, and where you are even suicidal, or you make destructive decisions that impact your life and the lives of your children and your children's children. That's the cycle. And we can break the cycle, but it's not easy. Nobody ever said that it was easy, but it's necessary. So Ms. Paige Banks, thank you so much for sharing it. Thank you. That truly was a blessing. My mom talks about my dad. She said his ministry was important, but his first ministry and our first ministry is family. She also said, she's referenced my dad, and she said the family has to understand that being in a ministerial home, ministry comes first. But guess what? With that, that means your family. And it's all about prioritizing. All about prioritizing. For example, my kids mean the world to me. My kids mean the world to me. And I will tell you, it doesn't matter about what choices they make. What choices they make how they choose to live, whatever, how they make me feel, it would never change how I feel about them. It would never change the support that I have for them. Nothing would ever change that. But the reason, and I will tell you, the reason why I say that is because I value them more than anything else, because I had to deal with something else being valued more than the family at a period of time, and I know how that feels. So I just wanted to address that and bring that to the conversation. How you doing, Miss Cassandra Lee? She said, good evening. And Miss Geraldine said, you can be alone in the crowd. Yeah, I was like, it's like you standing, but there's nobody seeing you. And she said, even at home. Yes, even at home. Now, what are some of the causes of neglect? A lot of times we are neglected by people by hurting people. When you are hurt, when you're wounded, it's easy to be neglectful to other people because of the symptoms that we deal with from our pain and our trauma. And yeah, you'd be like, man, Robert, I get what you're saying, man, but you've been talking about like pain and trauma, like, everybody that grew up, that's not everybody that grew up in very bad situations and nobody had any loving, that's not what I'm talking about. Listen, the stuff I'm talking about was in a godly home, a home that people love God, a very loving family, very supportive family. And there's areas where I don't have to deal with being wounded in certain areas because of the environment I grew up in. But that still doesn't take away from the fact that there are other areas where I have to address, because guess what? We ain't perfect. Everybody got their issues. Everybody got things that they go through. So that's why I wanted to, have this conversation, because so many of us, we go through life carrying things and not even being healed, and not just healed. That's why this thing has been on me for the last 2 months. And the question that Jesus asked in the New Testament, throughout the New Testament, he asked, will thou be made whole? And that question really just been having me pondering on some things. And I know I talked about it on some other shows, but just think about it. Why would he ask, then will they be made whole? Not healed, but made whole. And I think a lot of times what costs us from being made whole is we got these voids of neglect that we don't want to address. We don't want to address. And guess what? We can't do this thing by ourselves, man. We cannot do it by ourselves. We try to act like we can. We try to act like everything is good. We try to act like, we got it all together, especially these super saved people, we saved and we sanctified and we shout and we run and we do all these things, but can't nothing happen, and we can't have issues, because if we have issues, that will have a negative impact on the image I'm trying to portray, instead of the reality of who I know God is for me. So that's the thing that I wanted to address and talk about, because, and then we can even get deeper in this thing, man. We can even get deeper. The neglect of the fathers not being there. Some people, it has a positive impact. They'd be like, well, I didn't have a father, so I'm gonna be the best that I can for my kids. Other ones, they turn into what they hated, and they're not there. And the reason why they're not there is because because they choose not to deal with the issue of their father not being there. They're consumed with fear, so they're more likely to just run away from it instead of addressing it. Because guess what? I feel what I don't know. I never had great example of what it means to be a man. So how can I teach my son how to be a man? And a lot of people just get overwhelmed and they run away. We have, and I would tell you, this thing can be so much so much more. It's so connected, and so many second and third order effects that happen from being neglected and dealing with the unaddressed issues. You know, some of us have been promiscuous because we felt unloved or unaccepted by our parents or the environment that we grew up in. Um, um, and watch this. That has led us to have numerous kids and has impacted our quality of life, all because we haven't addressed the issue, the initial issue. See, this is the stuff, and this is not talking about, this is not pointing blame. This is not a shame. What this is really talking about is identifying what is the root cause. And remember, when I started this episode off, I talked about, I was 20 years ago, I asked God, why am I the way I am? And what God did, God began to show me what was the root cause, not the symptoms, but what was the root cause of my issue. And because that I was able to identify my issues, watch this. That doesn't mean that I'm not impacted by it today, but I know I'm better. I'm in a much better position to manage it because I know what my triggers are. I know what my triggers are. So that's what I wanted to talk about. That's what I wanted to talk about. Hey, what's going on, Kobe, man? Thank you, brother. Hey, episode 40, man. Hey, 40. You know, God has been good and I'm proud of it. And my whole goal is just continue to help and just be a voice that, you know, we can have a dialogue that people can come and somebody can watch and maybe help them get through something that they're going through. Miss Geraldine said that she said, I believe, remember I said, I believe that we don't know how to be made whole because there is no one to help us. Yes, we have God, yet we feel he is so far away. You know, and she said that goes back to communicating. But yeah, but this is why this is important, Miss Pastor, Miss Geraldine. These conversations is so important because the Bible said we overcome him, the enemy, by the blood of the Lamb. That means that the sacrifice that Jesus being crucified on the cross, and the words of our testimony. The words of our testimony. We are sharing things with other people. You know, the Bible also instructs us that old men teach young men how to be husbands, and older women teach young women how to be wives. What that's talking about is transferring the wisdom, sharing experiences, talking about those things that you've been through that help people. Because guess what, baby? I know you talking about, you know, if I'm dealing with something specific, if I'm dealing with a drug addiction, if I'm dealing with an addiction to alcoholism, if I'm dealing with a sex addiction, any type of an addiction, there's somebody that then dealt with that in the church or in the community, that's a godly person that can help them navigate that so that they can walk on the path of being made whole. A lot of times what we fail to realize when we talk about God and how God do things, God do things through other people. He does things through other people. That's why we have to be willing vessels to be in a place that we can hear the voice of God and move on his behalf to meet the needs of his people. And that's why I did a challenge last week at the end of the show to just call somebody and tell them that, you know, that you just give them a call and tell them that you're proud of them, or do something nice for somebody. And I would tell you, I get so much joy by doing it. I get so much joy by encouraging people, even though there's times where I need somebody to call and encourage me, even though there's times where I want to get up, give up, even though there's times where I just want to throw in a towel that I just don't want to feel like it. I'm not feeling it that day. But I made a commitment to continue to do that because guess what? I realized the impact of it. And because when I'm feeling that, if I'm feeling a certain way, where if I'm feeling down and feeling like I need to be encouraged, I can encourage somebody from that position because guess what? I can speak to that feeling. That if I've never been in that position, I can't speak to that feeling. And Miss Cassandra Lee, my mom said it. She said, we are afraid to be transparent because I would not be seen as perfect. I'm just tell you like this. Uh, uh, listen, listen. The easiest thing to do as a believer is be transparent. That's the easiest thing to do. And the reason why I say it's the easiest thing to do is because when you are transparent and you real about who you really are, it frees you up from all that wasted energy trying to keep up an image instead of just being who you really are. Um, and people are blessed by your authenticity, not based off of anything else. People are blessed by your authenticity. One of the things that I realized, and I made it a point in my life, was to meet people where they are and be myself. And be as transparent as I can. Now, watch this. I can be transparent, but I ain't got to let you know everything that I'm going through. I ain't got to tell you all the details, but I can tell you I've been in the neighborhood. I can tell you I've been out in the street. I don't have to tell you that I know the details about what's inside your house. And I hope y'all got that analogy. Ms. Cassandra Lee said, children who feel neglected learn early on not to need, which leads them to mask vulnerabilities that oftentimes resurface as adults. Now, I would say not only oftentimes, but most of the time resurface as an adult. And those same mechanism that they put in about trying to not be vulnerable impacts their relationship with others. Because watch this. You cannot have an effective relationship, even in an intimate relationship, in a business relationship, in any type of relationship. You cannot have an effective relationship without having vulnerability. It won't happen. It just won't happen. Period. I don't care how you try to do it, it will not happen. So that's why it is so imperative that we realize, like, you know what? Like, and I'm being honest with you. Some people are so afraid God will bless you with what you need, but because you don't want to be vulnerable, you try to outdo God and push away the blessing that God bless you with, and then will sit back and complain because you don't want to change your mindset. You want everything else to adjust to you, and everybody else is the problem, but you don't want to address that you are the problem. You're the source of the problem. You are a source of a problem. And that's why I feel like, this conversation tonight is something that is deep, because I can guarantee you all of us can look at ourselves and be like, think about this. and think about some of the decisions that we made from a place of hurt because we've been hurt by neglect, that we look back on right now and we like, man, that was the dumbest thing in the world. And we made those decisions for years, all because of fear, all because of maybe pride, all because of misunderstanding. And it's imperative that we continue to challenge ourselves to grow in the things of God, and especially as believers, to start putting actions to certain things so that we can bring about change in our lives. I'm convinced, I am so convinced that we have, as a church, have so overly spiritualized this Christian walk that we have created a mentality, a mindset of hocus pocus instead of a mindset of action. Yes. And I'm not saying that God can do anything. God can do anything. But I'm going to say this. God can do anything. But if I'm dealing with high blood pressure and I don't change my eating habits and change my way of life, what do you think gonna happen? Now I can sit here all day and just pray, and I'm just praying and praying. Dear Heavenly Father, in the name of Jesus, I can do all of that stuff, right? I can do all the theatrics of church, but if I don't want to change my mindset, it's still gonna be the same result. And then we try to spiritualize things, but not willing to do the work. No, listen, there's always will be a requirement for God, from God, for us to do the work. There will always be a requirement from God for us to do the work. Think about throughout the Bible. God created it, even go back to Genesis. He created the Garden of Eden, and Adam had to cultivate it. Come on, man. There's a we I mean, you go throughout. Abraham had to leave Ur and go. People had to do a lot of different things. There's action that is required to get results in our way of life. I mean, in our walk of faith. We got to put action to it. We have to put actions to it. So it is necessary that we do. I'm going to read a few comments. My mom said, we may not face all of our problems, but we can't solve any problems until we face them. That is so true. And then also facing your problems, what you realize is there's a lot of people waiting on you to heal so you can be their blessing and help them walk through it. And I will say that again. There are a lot of people waiting on you to heal so that you can be a blessing to them later on. I can remember going through my divorce and being so mad, being so angry at God. And I'm asking God, why? And the Holy Spirit kept saying, why not? And I'm saying, like, hey, bro, like, I ain't got time for that. I don't want it. Why? Now I know why. Because guess what? Because of that experience, not only have I been able to write songs, I've been able to minister and share from that experience to help people. The words of my testimony has been able to help people, talk them off a ledge, help meet them, help them see that they're not alone, help them get to a place where they're like, okay, I feel much better just by talking to you, because I made a decision to go through that. And they were waiting on me. But even though it was 12 years after, even though it was 10 years after, they were still waiting on me to go through my experience so that I can be a blessing to them in the future. And we got to realize that everything that happened to you or that happened to you is not about you. And we have to realize that. We have to realize that. Brandy, she said, faith without work is dead. Roberta said, I've witnessed myself how communication, a mere conversation, freed up not one, but two generations. We play a big part in our own healing. Will thou be? And watch this. Everybody he asked, they weren't kids. They were grown people that Jesus asked, will you be made whole? My mom said, that's the thing about being made whole. Healing is one thing. Being made whole is the freedom we need. I like that. The freedom we need. So, this thing is so powerful, man. Y'all kind of see how deep it is. And I just challenge, listen, this ain't nothing to be afraid of. I'm not ashamed of that. I'm not ashamed of that. And it freed me. Listen, I'm telling you, it has given me the freedom. They said the Philippians 4:7, the peace that surpasses all understanding. When you start healing, when you start choosing to be made whole, it gives you the freedom that my mom just talked about, the freedom to walk in something, to walk in, that's when the scripture, Psalms 23, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will not fear evil. And that's what's so powerful with that, is because that freedom eliminates fear. It eliminates that fear. And guess what? That fear, I'm not scared to be vulnerable. I'm not scared because somebody else didn't appreciate me being vulnerable, or somebody else chose not to or love me the way or meet my needs or chose to exploit my vulnerabilities. I'm not afraid to do that with somebody else because I'm free. Uh, that's what the scripture said, whom the Son set free is free indeed. That freedom is liberty, liberty to be liberated. And I would tell you that freedom is a great thing. Uh, uh, my mom said the Holy Spirit is gangster. Oh, it's real gangster. And I'll tell you, everything that it say, you might not want to hear it, but I'll tell you, from my personal experience, it has been necessary and it's been grateful for me. I would tell you guys, I'm just being transparent for me, for the last few months, just personally going through some stuff. Uh, uh, and I can remember at the beginning of the year, talk about 2021 being a year that God will renew, revive, restore, and reset. And I thought about it. And renew, revive, restore, and reset. And as I thought about that, it reminded me, and I was like, man, it's not so much about, oh man, you going through. No, I've been in the process of being renewed, being revived, being restored, and God is doing a reset in me, in my way of thinking, in my mentality, in how I look at certain things, and how I manage certain things about me, and how I am honest about the things that I see and know about myself, and what steps am I doing to address those things? What habits am I developing? What discipline am I applying to certain things to manifest the results that I want to see in my life? And I'm so grateful for that. And I just been being so encouraged by seeing some of my friends and seeing how they operate, and seeing them being vulnerable and submitted to God, and seeing other people just growing. And that's why it motivates me to encourage other people and be a source of encouragement, not because it ain't got nothing to do with about an agenda or anything. Heck no. What it all has to do about is meeting the needs of people. Because guess what? We all trying to do our thing and find our way. So with that, I want to say this. So I am finishing up my second album, and the title of the album will be The Conversation. And I will tell you guys, this album is just going to be off the meat rack. And I'm telling y'all, I'm not just saying that just because. It has literally blown my mind what God has been doing and the topics that's been addressed, and how he's been dropping nuggets, and how he's been setting everything up. And I had to sit on this thing for a minute. I hadn't my first album I released in 2014. It was taking me 7 years. 7 years, a lot of stuff that was going on, but 7 years to come up with the second one. And man, this thing is going to be a blessing to others. So you guys will be seeing more about that, more to follow with that. I promise you, this thing will be a blessing to you and will speak on a lot of things that I feel that the Spirit of God wants to be addressed at this time and in this season. I wanted to ask you guys for a favor to be with me in prayer, and I want to pray for a real good friend of mine. He was on this show a few weeks ago, Pastor Matthew Miller. I just wanted you guys to just go to your throne room, to go to God on his behalf. Matthew Miller, Pastor Matthew Miller, who's down in Katy, Texas, and let's lift him up, pray for healing, pray for his family. Let's lift him up in prayer. I'll always joke with him, but he's my big little brother. He's actually he's actually older than me, but I'm bigger than him, so I call him my big little brother. But he's somebody that our spirits bonded together doing a deployment in 2003 and 4. So we've been connected. We've been knowing each other for over 18, almost 20 years now. I just want to lift him up in prayer. And also, I challenge you guys to continue this thing going. Keep this thing going. Call somebody tonight. Send somebody a text. Tell them that you're proud of them. Tell them that you see what they're doing. You know, it's so good to be recognized about. You know, there's not a lot that can top somebody seeing your sacrifice and seeing the commitment and seeing the hard work you're doing, and they just call you and say, "Hey, man, I see what you're doing. Hey, girl, I see what you're doing. I'm proud of you." Uh, oh, as well, I want to give a shout out to Miss Josephine Bennett. She just got her PhD. So Dr. Bennett from Greensboro, Alabama, she just got her PhD from Liberty University. Hey, we got the Black Belt doing great things. Shout out to Representative Howard and Dr. Pickens for their donations for the player lounge for the Greensboro High School football team. Hey, it's a lot of things that a lot of people are doing. I'm not focusing on the negative. I'm highlighting the positive. Hey, I'm so proud of what you guys. I thank you guys for your continued support. Hey, God is so good. I'm so excited about to take this thing to a new level. I mean, taking it to a new level, just having these conversations. Make sure you share this with somebody. Make sure, you know, if they got questions, reach out to me, shoot me an inbox, send me a DM. We can talk about certain things because guess what? It's about people healing. And my goal is for somebody to be enlightened to the point where their lives has changed and they impact the lives of others. So you guys continue to be a blessing. Have a great day and enjoy your day. Enjoy your night tonight. God bless.